presenter is Dr. Barbara C. Murrell, who is a native of Greenwood, Mississippi. She has dedicated her career to serving and educating students. After high school, she matriculated at Tennessee Agricultural and Industrial College, now Tennessee State University, here in Nashville. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree in biology in 1960. She was elected Miss Tennessee State University 1959 to 1960. She received the Master of Science degree in Educational Guidance in 1963 and is a graduate of the Institute of Educational Management at Harvard University. Her stellar career as an educator and administrator spans more than 40 years. She began her career here at Tennessee State University in 1965 as Director of Student Activities, where she actively counseled student government officials and provided leadership for the development of student support services. In 1975, she was named Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, and in 1981, Mrs. Murrell was appointed Vice President for Student Affairs and became the first female Vice President at Tennessee State University. She is a member of the Ventures Club, 40-plus years of graduates of Tennessee State University, and currently serves as the president of the Ventures Club. Dr. Murrell, was wife of Robert N. Murrell, former Dean of Men and Director of Housing at Tennessee State University. She supports the Robert N. Murrell Oratorial Contest, which is the traditional opening event for Tennessee State University's homecoming. She has one son, Claude, and grandson, Claude Murrell Jr. Would you please welcome Dr. Barbara C. Murrell.
Good afternoon again, and I want to give my appreciation to the committee for the conference for inviting me to present, to Ms. Divins in this library for all the assistance she's given, to Officer Cusick, who had incredible records on the history of Nashville, Tennessee, and in the memory of Dr. Larry Cole, who encouraged me for the last several years to really write a book, and this may be the beginning. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to share with you some history on student leadership and student life at Tennessee State University from 1965 to 1990. This subject is very significant because the Tennessee State University family and community are celebrating 100 years of leadership and unity. Therefore, reviewing student leadership during a quarter of this century will recognize and document the contributions of elected student leaders and their constituents during this period. In my professional career at Tennessee State University, I spent 22 years in the area of student affairs, from the position of Director of Student Activities to the Vice President of Student Affairs. In preparation for this presentation, I have enjoyed the walk down memory lane, the opportunity to relive some key moments in history with these STA presidents we talked about today, in conversations with them, in interviews with them, and receiving their surveys. All had the opportunity to speak with except 3 who are deceased, and 1 I could not contact, who's out of the country. Our collective goals have been to add information and credibility to this history of an area where much of the documents have been destroyed. It is our goal also to publish a book which more vividly portrays this rich legacy. My presentation will be in 3 parts. 1, the philosophy of student leadership at Tennessee State University. 2, the organization of Student Government Association. And then I will invite you to take a brief stroll down memory lane as we review some of the 25 years of history and point out those who had the most impact on Tennessee State University. Dr. Walt S. Davis, who in his inaugural address committed to improve the student activity program. In his Avon First Class Deluxe Fashion, he envisioned a campus where students could share talents in our out-of-class activities while also being inspired, informed, and entertained by professionals who would serve as models of human achievement. He endorsed the right of the student leadership to be the voice and catalyst for student opinion and concern. His vision was embraced through most of this quarter of a century. Secondly, I would like to talk about the organization of the Student Government Association. The Student Government Association was organized as the apex organization on the campus with authority to annually certify all student organizations. Their auxiliary organizations were performing duties according to their mission, which gave the Student Council the opportunity to monitor the organizations and have appropriate time to devote to the needs and concerns of students. For instance, the Student Union Board of Governors planned and implemented all social, cultural, and recreational activities. 2, the Panhellenic Council regulated the activities of 3 organizations. 3, the Student Senate held campus elections. The Student Election Commission held campus elections. And the Student Senate participated in the disciplinary process. So over the 25 years, students were benefited by being inspired and entertained by most outstanding leaders and entertainers in the country. Again, this provided the opportunity for the Student Council, composed of elected officials representing all classes of the university, to concentrate on the needs and concerns of the students. Now I invite you to walk down memory lane as we look through these 25 people in a very brief way. I'll put them in categories because I realize time is of essence. And as we look at these, I will stop and highlight some of the ones who had the greatest impact on the history of Tennessee State. The question I'd like to ask you to think about as you go through this process is if you consider, do you feel that the students' involvement in the student leadership impacted their future in any way? I set the scene for this walk down memory lane. TSU in the 60s had been in local, national, and international news with the student sit-ins, with undefeated football team, basketball team that had won 3 championships in the NAIA after just being admitted, foreign tours of the Codes Players Guild to military bases across the country, the United States and abroad, band in the Kennedy's inaugural parade, and Wilma Rudolph and the Tiger Bells bringing Olympic medals back from Rome. That's the scene that these students entered into. Levi Watkins, our first president in 1965, felt that this should be some way that Tennessee State could get national recognition for its outstanding academic program. He felt that there should be increased awareness of this program and campaigned during his junior year for that cause. As you note here, both he was Mr. Brains this year, he is a senior, and his vice president of student government was Ms. Brains, both of whom were excellent students and promoted academic excellence. This is a view of election activities. Elections were designed to emulate the national elections of the United States, and therefore you see the nomination convention, speeches, voting, and election of winners. Levi served as the national president of Alpha Kappa Mu, which is an honor society recognizing those academically achieving students. And on the left side, you see a picture of Dr. Gore, who was the founder of Alpha Kappa Mu, on the campus of Tennessee State University, and there are chapters across the United States now. This move towards student academic excellence and the need for it to be recognized really brought on the honors program. And you see in the right corner the two co-directors of the First Honors Program. That's Dr. McDonald Williams and Dr. Pat Gilbert. Now, I want to say that Levi was the first African-American graduate of Vanderbilt School of Medicine and is internationally known as a cardiac surgeon from Johns Hopkins who performed the first surgery of the implantable defibrillator. To date, over 1 million lives have been saved as a result of this surgery. We'll move to looking at his student council and then to Obi McKenzie, the second president of student government. Obi McKenzie was president during the era of the SNCC and Stokely-Carmichael Revolution, which brought forth unrest across the United States. And if you notice on the second video screen, we have Stokely-Carmichael appearing on the campus of Tennessee State University and also in front of the old Student Union building. These were turbulent years in America when students began to demand their rights to freedom of speech and cry out against the Vietnam War, which was also the position of Dr. Martin Luther King. Obi graduated from Harvard Business School and has recently been honored as one of the most influential professionals on Wall Street, serving as the managing director of BlackRock Investment Company. James Montgomery emerged as the natural student leader, with the ability to lead the entire student body to action with his speech. His student council was composed of the people that you note on the screen. The ones at the bottom was his team that beat the Harvard debate team under the direction of Mr. Troy Jones. After this meeting, on this particular day, it was noted as we moved out of that meeting that Dr. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And the students that you saw on the wall before the picture of the last picture was the students who normally sat on the wall in the afternoons and talked. So when they heard the news of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, their reaction was to throw stones at the traffic that was coming through the campus. If you can imagine, at that time, the traffic that came through the campus was from the Ford Motor Company, because that was the only way to get into the city. So all the Ford people who got off at a certain shift came through the campus. So throwing those rocks at the cars, you see obviously the impact. And the picture on the left is Assistant Police Chief John Sarasi, who was injured with one of those stones. And at the bottom, you see that the National Guard came to the campus and obviously made martial law. And it was Montgomery and Dr. Davis who went to the governor and requested that the marshals be moved from the campus because both the student government could be controlled by Montgomery and the university could be controlled by the president. So they were removed from the campus. Montgomery graduated from Harvard Law School and Yale Divinity School. He is now deceased. Dr. Davis left the campus because of ill health. And there was a committee responsible, headed by Arthur Downer. And shortly after the beginning of that evening's activity, the ROTC building burned. That's a picture of some of the athletes going on top of the building to put out the fire, and of course, Coach Murrell assisting in that effort. The next president who came immediately after that was Dr. Andrew P. Torrance. William Choctaw was president during that time and spent his years working with Dr. Torrance in providing his leadership for the campus. The next several Student Government Association presidents, Ernest Gray, William Mott, and Robert Smith, moved their concern to campus concerns. As I mentioned earlier, the floor traffic coming to the campus was quite heavy, and it was difficult to move back and forth across the street. So as a result of that, one of the students was injured in a car accident. So you can see Ernest Gray with the bullhorn, and you can also see the chief of police there. And out of that protest, came this bridge, which came across the campus from the north side to the south side, which made it possible for students to cross over without the danger of being hit by an automobile. William Martin, I must mention that Choctaw was a graduate of Yale Medical School and has a law degree from Western University, and he owns and operates a medical clinic in Savannah, California. William Martin, Ernest Gray, and Robert Smith all were involved in working to address campus concerns. Ernest Gray died in the Vietnam War. William Martin is a businessman in Houston, Texas, and Robert Smith is a local attorney and instructor at Tennessee State University. Then in 1973, there was a newspaper article that questioned on the left side, you can note, that TSU's future and fate was to be discussed in a secret meeting. So obviously, I was concerned for the student leadership. And for the next 3 years, Ricky Pearson, Bernard Turner, and Marcus Lucas engaged in activities to support the idea that students were very interested in the future development of Tennessee State University, and that it remained an institution where they could be proud. Now, Ricky Pearson graduated from Howard Hill Law School, and he served as Assistant State Attorney General for the state of Kentucky. Marcus Lucas is in corporate America, and William Martin is a businessman. Bernard Turner graduated from Howard Law School, and he is now deceased. We went to the new presidency of Dr. Frederick Humphreys, and upon his coming to the campus, there was much discussion about the merger of Tennessee State University. And he took the position that Tennessee State should merge with UT Nashville and that TSU should be the predominant university and maintain its heritage. Cunningham, Shirley Cunningham, Brian Williams, you'll see soon, and Redford Jenkins, along with Ken Hawkins, all had concerns about the future of Tennessee State University. And while there were dances and concerts and all of these activities going on campus, these students were more interested in knowing what the future of the university would be. Cunningham graduated from the University of Kentucky Law School and has a law practice. Kenneth Hawkins is in business in the state of Florida. Brian Williams. I'll take a moment to spotlight Brian Williams because during his presidency, we had the terrible problem of no heat on the campus. With several requests by the administration to repair the boiler or to change the boiler to the state government, we did not get any response. Brian Williams said, don't worry about it, you take care of the rest of the business, we'll take care of this. So, on these pictures, you'll see Brian Williams addressing the state legislature. You'll see on the left, students moving toward the state legislature, and you'll see the person is spelling his name for Attorney Avon Williams and other persons there who were entertaining the students. People from Tennessee State University explaining the problem, and after that meeting, we were given money to replace the boiler at Tennessee State University to give us heat. Redford Jenkins obviously is a group of this segment. He's also a lawyer and is out of the country at this time. Now, the next group of student leaders will be for the post-merger years. Ron Ashman was the student government president responsible for the uniting of the Student Government Association from the University of Tennessee at Nashville and Tennessee State University. You will see there the picture of the inauguration of the Vice President of Student Government Association, who came on board from the downtown campus. That was the election process, and he was elected as Vice President. On the left-hand side at the bottom, you will see the first constituted Student Government Association after the merger of Tennessee State and UTN. And on the right-hand side, you will see the student leadership, the president, the vice president, and there were two. The next several years, we will look at Fred Jackson, Georgette Peak, Darren Bowden, and Tony Spratler. During those years of post-merger, there were many ways that students, along with administrators, made an effort to make new friends, to do recruiting programs in different cities across the state of Tennessee. In fact, the Southern Heritage Classic that we're all familiar with in Memphis, Tennessee, was started this year by Tennessee State and sponsored by Tennessee State in Memphis. There were also recruiting elements or facets in both Chattanooga and Knoxville. Concerts were in high gear, along with Stevie Wonder, Ashford Simpson, and other outstanding persons on the campus. And that particular series of years, we entertained homecoming crowds of 40,000 people in Evangeline Stadium. And many of you probably remember those golden days. The general theme for those days with those SGA presidents was pulling together and uniting for the future. So Roosevelt Ham is a staff attorney with Allstate Insurance Company in Atlanta, Georgia. Fred Jackson, and I'll almost have to read this since his is a little bit more involved. Fred Jackson, as you see, had a unique leadership. If you notice the bottom picture on the other side, he had his own unique way of representing the people to be sure that everybody stayed in line. So they were kind of like the watchdog group of that segment. Fred Jackson became Director of the Office of Security and Law Enforcement, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Operations, Security, and Preparedness for the Department of Veteran Affairs. Georgette Peak was among the group. Georgette now is Senior Vice President of Wells Fargo, who partners with the United Negro College Fund to raise funds for HBCUs and sponsors the UNCF Empower Me Tour campaign to raise financial literacy levels of college students. She is also the first female president of the Student Government Association. Darren Bowden was one of the ones who was in this era, and Darren is associate judge with the Circuit Court of Cook County, 6th District. He's a graduate of Thurwood Marshall Law School in Texas Southern University. Tony Spratler is now in Memphis, Tennessee, and he is working with youth as a youth director with the city of Memphis. The next era introduced on campus was the era of Dr. Roy Peterson. After the resignation of the president of Tennessee State, who was Dr. Humphreys, to assume the presidency of his alma mater, Dr. Peterson came to the campus as the interim president in 1985. Dr. Peterson was chosen by the chancellor. He was appointed by the State Board of Regents and brought an agenda to the campus to take out during his year at TSU. On one of his first meetings with the Student Government Association, he let it be clear and known that the students were to be students and go to class, and they were not to get involved in any of the activities of the interest of the university's future, but more so allow the student administrators, the campus administrators to do that. Obviously, that did not sit well with the students, so as a result, we started off on a pretty rocky road. as you see, after the merger, there were several interpretations. One interpretation was that Tennessee State University and University of Tennessee merged, and the university would continue from that day forward, ignoring the history of the university. There was another interpretation of others who felt that the Tennessee State University was an organization, was the university that could maintain its heritage, and with the joining in of UTM, we would both move together forward. And of course, that example of those interpretations played out in this print that we have on the stage now. Augustus Macedos was president of the Student Government Association. Ebony magazine always sent for the names and information and pictures of the queens through the years. That particular year, Miss Tennessee State was not allowed to be a part of that. And I believe the explanation was, and maybe you can read that, is that it was not sure that we were considered to be a black college. And this was a black organization and we were just featuring black queens. Well, Carlton Petway, a local attorney, became the attorney for Miss Regina Hampton and represented her to the to the university administration. Out of that representation, you see that Miss TSU won a public apology by the university and also was put into the Ebony magazine. Now, Miss Tennessee State University has been featured in the Ebony magazine since that time. So I did want to add that slide. Now, I do have some additional slides here that talks about the interim TSU presidents not bitter of conflicts, which would suggest to you that there were many conflicts. And I believe the Chancellor Garland at that time received the signatures of 1,000 students who requested the resignation of the interim president, Dr. Peterson. In April of that year, he resigned as of June, and then during those days. Gregory Clark, who was an academician. And I must tell you that Augustus Macedos is now a very, I must tell you this, a person who is working in Washington, D.C. with the university, with the Securities and Exchange Division, and he is an attorney. Special Counsel, United States Securities and Exchange Commission, Office of Legal Compliance, Inspections, and Examinations from Washington, D.C. He's a graduate of Thurgood Marshall Law School at Texas Southern University. Now, Gregory Clark came on the campus, and I noticed to put the documentation because he was a writer, and he was a great leader for the students. They respected him greatly, and he did quite a few things, among which was to help us celebrate the 75th anniversary of Tennessee State University during that year. And the title for the entire year was Some Traditions Are Forever. So all of the activities that we had that year were reminiscent of those 75 prior years in which the university had existed. Gregory Clark did become a very active person in the search for the new president of Tennessee State University and served on the committee to nominate to the Board of Regents the next president of Tennessee State University. He also, during that time, knowing that the chief person over schools in the state of Tennessee was the governor. So he had several conversations with Governor McWhirter and talked about the student government being involved in his campaign. He was about to run for governor of the state of Tennessee. And he promised Greg Carr that he would certainly be kind to TSU if in fact he was able to be governor of the state of Tennessee. When the McWhirter building was dedicated on the main campus, Governor McWhirter made the comment that many of the things that he had done over his years involved TSU, and most particularly did he remember the promise that he made to Greg Clark and his brother and others during his run for the governorship of the state of Tennessee. Now, Greg is presently at Howard University, and he's head of the Department of African American Studies. He was chosen last year as the most outstanding faculty member at Howard University. He received his PhD degree from Ohio State University in African American Studies, and he received his law degree from Temple University. The next person who came on the scene was Dr. Otis Floyd. Dr. Floyd came with a three-person student government skill in my group, Miller, Brown, and Jeff Carr. I left Tennessee, I left student affairs prior to these young men coming aboard. Had the opportunity to work with them when they were freshmen and sophomores. They were outstanding students. I read in the Tennessean during this era that there was quite a bit of concern about the students' rights on campus, and these young men were very vocal in representing their students' population at that time. I think that what happened during that period of time, as documented in the newspaper, that after they were not able to get the satisfaction that the students' needs would be given, they staged on this campus a 22-day sit-in. And after that sit-in and the resolution of that sit-in, Dr. Floyd went to the State Board of Regents as chancellor, and a new president was selected. Now, persons on the board you see there now are Dr. and Attorney Alfred T. Miller, who is Senior Vice President of Finance and Operations at Schultz Foundation for Public Education and former Executive Director of Recruitment and Admissions for New Leaders and former Deputy Chief of Staff for the City of Cleveland. Fred Brown is a pharmacist in Memphis, Tennessee, and probably all of you know Jeffrey Cox, who is a local actor, playwright, and producer of films here in Nashville and across the country. So the question I'd like to ask you, as we have walked down memory lane, is do you think, having known now what these young people have done in their post-Tennessee State years and in their careers, do you think their involvement in student leadership propelled them or helped them in their future? Thank you very much.